Welcome to Leading Out Loud with Dr. Chantell Manahan, the podcast where we amplify authentic voices, bold ideas, and real impact in education. I'm a K-12 CTO, education consultant, and proud forever learner. And I believe leadership gets better when we share what works, what's hard, and what's possible. So let's dive into stories and strategies from the leaders shaping the future of schools, one conversation at a time. I'm honored today to have as our guest Dr. Dana Altemeyer, who is the Director of Communications for the MSD of Lawrence Township. Dana, thanks for being here. And we met and we share a similar origin story, a similar beginning. We're both French teachers turned district leaders. So will you tell our guest what's your origin story and how did communication become such a through line in your journey?
Okay. I would be happy to. Well, first, thank you so much for welcoming me on. I'm excited to talk with you and advocate on behalf of the communications profession because it is much needed. So I am an Indianapolis native. I went all the way through school, actually in private schools, yet have spent my entire career in public schools. I majored in elementary education and I loved it, but I knew quickly that it was not for me. I knew the education space was for me, but that wasn't where I was meant to be. Mm-hmm. And I had an advisor at the time share with me, you're a French minor, and the state at the time, a middle school endorsement. Mm-hmm. So I added a middle school endorsement in French onto my license. And at that point, I had also realized that I wanted to pursue school counseling. Mm-hmm. So in some ways, it was a means to an end, but mm-hmm. I can't tell you how much fun I had teaching middle school French in Franklin Township. Mm-hmm. And I am proud to say that after my only 2 years there, they had the highest enrollment in French at the high school in the history of their program. So I feel like I did something right. Went on to pursue school counseling. It was wonderful. I loved being a school counselor. And I've always said, at some point, if everyone just says, you know what, we're all going back to the classroom, I would do it in a heartbeat. I had a wonderful experience serving students in Indianapolis public schools as a counselor, but I was tapped on the shoulder by a mentor and colleague that saw something in me. Mm-hmm. And encouraged me to pursue that administrative licensure. And as I've shared with other education professionals, it's another tool in your tool belt. It's great education. It's great professional development. It's great leadership training, regardless of if you are a teacher leader or if at some point you go into building or district administration. Mm-hmm. So I did that program on top of my master's and was fortunate enough to serve as an assistant principal, also in the Indianapolis public schools at Harshman Middle School. Also a wonderful experience, but as you know, the education space has changed in central Indiana as it has throughout the state and the country. And it became clear to me that I was going to need to make a change. And so I thought back to, this is going to sound really funny. I thought back to a career assessment that I took in probably the 10th or 11th grade. It was called the Myers-Briggs. And I still remember it to this day. I remember it so clearly. ESFJ. Mm-hmm. Extroverted sensor feeler judger. And the strengths that I had found in my leadership role in school counseling, in teaching, in building administration, in connecting community and telling stories and building relationships. And so I started to think about how can I make that work in an education space? And I saw a position in Lawrence Township that said Coordinator of Communications, Public Relations, and Marketing. So a very long title. And I thought, you know what, this warrants a conversation. And I thought about the work that I'd done in that point in close to 10 years. And it just seemed like a really good fit. And now having been in this role for, going on 12 years, to see how it has evolved and expanded significantly. It's incredible, and it's been a journey, and I'm really grateful to be in this position where I am presently.
I love how your path really hits so many of the different areas of the education journey, right? From classroom teacher, counselor, principal, and then a district administration. I also love the parallels between kind of what you're seeing as your journey and in communications, and the way that things have evolved and grown as you've taken over the role kind of mirrors what's happened in the technology world too. So, I'm a district administrator in technology, and people don't really realize that either one of these paths is a career in the education space. So we don't do a really good job of publicizing the fact that I was a classroom teacher, you were a classroom teacher, and there are lots of leadership roles outside of principal or superintendent, and like carving that path, bringing all those experiences together, you know intimately the different areas of the school, what it feels like to sit in the principal's seat, what it feels like to be in a classroom teacher's seat, and watching that evolve as schools have evolved. What an amazing story.
Thank you.
So I know your role as the district communications director, you do all the things, right? So big communications, small communications. Can you just check this? Can you proofread this? Is this following our branding and our messaging? But in your view, let's focus on those small everyday messages. What story do things like newsletters, emails, and quick staff updates, what story do those tell?
Well, in the case of Lawrence Township, which is where I have held this role, is that continued message of excellence. Education is a hot button topic. It's been highly politicized, but at the end of the day, we are preparing young people to take our place. So what we do is of the utmost importance, and we need to support our young people, and we need to celebrate our young people as well as the educators that are pouring into them. So in everything that I put out, I talk about celebrating Lawrence excellence. And whether it's our performance on the iRead, or a student of the month, or a student doing a selfless act, it all matters and it all adds up. And, they say you need to hear something 6 or 7 times before it really resonates. And so we have an obligation as communications professionals to communicate that excellence every single day, because we're talking about people. People are messy. Life is messy. Sometimes things happen, and sometimes they don't paint public education, a school corporation, a school, an individual in the best light. But we've built that capital of excellence. And I feel like when you do that, people are far more forgiving. They are far more likely to see the bigger picture, and move forward and not get caught up on one thing that maybe happened 10 years ago that wasn't so great. Instead, you look at a pattern of excellence and a pattern of positive communication and a pattern of dialogue. Because part of being a communications leader is hearing what your stakeholders are saying, even if it's not what you want to hear. But we have to listen to those stakeholders. And in education, we have to remember that those stakeholders are not just our staff and students and families. In public education, it's our broader community. It's our taxpayers. It's our realtors. It's our faith-based organizations. We need to be listening to that dialogue, and we need to be responsive to those needs and to that feedback.
So with all of that communication and that focus on excellence, I next wondered, how do you keep communication authentic and human when the workload is heavy and the stakes are so high?
I have the privilege of working for a superintendent that has quite a tenure in his superintendency. In the state of Indiana, the average superintendent holds their position for 4 years. And that's not a long time. Yes, and that is recent data. That is data from this year. And that's not a long time when you talk about sizable culture shifts or strategic plans, long-term planning, facilities, etc. We've worked together for 12 years. So my situation differs from others that are in this space. And my superintendent is very present. He is present. He is everywhere. Sometimes I don't know how he does it. And oftentimes I'm with him. So yes, we always want to communicate directly, factually, empathetically. But I feel like working with a leader that not only has the tenure, but also is a regular face and presence in the community personalizes that message. So it's not just a message from the superintendent that I'm receiving from the school messaging platform. I've got a face to go with that message, whether it's because he was at a parent faculty organization meeting or at a basketball game, or because Dr. Altemeyer hosted the realtors and talked about the impacts of SEA 1 and how we have the second lowest property tax rate in Marion County. There are people tied to that messaging, and they're people that you know. So whether or not you like the message, whether or not it resonates you, which I certainly hope it does, and that you do, I think those relationships make a huge difference. So being present. It's hard to be a leader when you're not there.
You're so correct that when it's personal, when it's human, when it doesn't feel like a robot,
Yes.
the communication is going to land better, even when the communication may not be what people want to hear. They don't just see it as a declaration from on high, but they see it as, this person in our community that we know, we usually trust, reaching out with whatever that communication may be. So key, because that is what makes it human. Humans make it human, and you have to have the human there for the human to be in the messaging.
Right. And I think as leaders, though, we have to remember, I talk about communicating excellence. We as leaders are still going to be the face of whatever that situation is. And hopefully it's good, but we have to get out of our feelings that sometimes people aren't going to like what we say. And it's not personal. It's not personal. It wouldn't matter if it was you, if it was me, if it was anybody else in that role. You become the face. And we have to get past those feelings and have the courage to lead.
So true, because sometimes you're the face of the message, but the message is coming from the Department of Education,
Right.
Whether it's from the federal level or the state level. Sometimes you're just the messenger of that communication and how it's affecting your community. My next question, Dana, how do you make sure that families, staff, you alluded to this a little bit before, the larger community, how do you make sure that family, staff, students feel seen and they also feel heard through your district storytelling?
Well, I think you have to build, we'll call them ambassadors, in every school that are going to help propagate that positive narrative. We have 21 schools. So we're a large district, and I can't possibly know what's happening in every building every day. So we have to have those champions in our buildings that are not only sharing that information with their building stakeholders, with their families, but that are also sharing that information with my office so that I can as well. You can't go it alone. One of the first things I did when I took this role was immediately went to every building and met with every principal and talked about who I was, why I was there, and that in central office, it is our charge to serve the schools. We are to make things easier for them, not more difficult. And if you have something that should be celebrated or needs to be put out there broadly, let me know. I might be able to help you. So oftentimes, when a principal calls me, how can I help? I want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem or an additional burden or assignment or something for you to do. So obviously, building those relationships, having those champions in your building, identifying those storytellers and empowering them to share those stories on social media, in the Sunday messages from the principals. But ultimately, I need to know about that, because I might be able to expand that reach even farther.
Serving the building, serving the staff, serving the students and the community. And that's a big charge, but you're right. It doesn't have to be something that you're doing alone. You're a resource. You're an amplification for the work that they're already doing and sharing.
Right. Yeah. And at the end of the day, families, and I think about this as a mom too, families don't want to hear from the director of communications. They want to hear from their principal. They want to hear from their teachers. Those are their people. Yes, I'm here. Yes, I support. Yes, I am a cheerleader and a champion, but families want that personal communication too.
Yeah. The people closest to the work, the closest to their students, right? And that's often building based, not from the central office. So how do we empower them and serve them while amplifying what they do? Love that. And that's really true. That's exactly what I found in doing, research for my own dissertation around school communications and how that interplays with enrollment decisions. Is families don't really want to hear from the central office as often as they want to hear from the classroom teacher, the building principal, the people who know their students by name. They know probably their results of their Myers-Briggs personality tests, like you shared. Those people who truly, truly know their students, that's what they want. That's who they want to hear from, and where the message often can mean the most. And then the amplification from the larger school district.
Yes, but knowing at the end of the day that central office is there to support, and when that communication is warranted or appropriate, that it will happen.
There's a lot of data that comes around school districts, and communications are no exception. So what role does data play in understanding whether your communication is working, and how do you balance metrics with meaning?
Ooh. Well, I love analytics. I love seeing the impact of our messaging, and that's something that we have the luxury of in a digital age, because, like it or not, a lot of the communication that we engage in is digital, whether it's, a website, a social media post, a newsletter. I mean, we have the capability of drilling down to the exact time that something was or wasn't opened, and which demographic, which subsection of our population opened it, and at what time was it most impactful. So I can geek out over that stuff. And obviously, I look at our click-through rates. I see what works and what messaging resonates, and I try to build upon that. But I also don't let it define what we do. If a school is having a celebration, or if something is happening, I don't care what time it is. We're going to share it. And we're going to share it right away. Not just because the data tells me that it would be more impactful and more people would open it if I sent it at 11 a.m. tomorrow. So I don't I do engage in the data-driven decision-making when we're talking about a campaign, say an enrollment campaign or strategy, because my job has shifted a lot. I am focused on strategic marketing a lot of the time, because we are in an era of competition. So I have to use data for that. But when I'm talking about authentic storytelling and sharing what I call Lawrence excellence, I'm not going to be driven by the data on whether or not I share that information. It will always go out.
Balance, right? Because there's a strategy side of this, as you said, strategic communications, and there we need to pull that in. It's like when we're examining, test scores. We need to be strategic about where are our weaknesses, where are our strengths, how do we build upon strengths, and how do we remediate weaknesses. But that's not, looking at test scores isn't going to deter us from, pulling in that awesome community resource as a guest speaker, or celebrating the other great, character building things that school districts are doing.
Yes.
No metrics at the expense of the human touch, but metrics to inform the human touch.
Oh, I like that. I like that. And I think, as we talk about data, I think we also have an obligation as school communicators to explain data. We're full of edu-speak. We throw out test scores and attendance rates and metrics of student performance. But a lot of times these things are communicated. And again, I'm using my lens as a school communicator. They're provided without context. So what does that mean? Let's take the A through F model as an example of data and context. As we all know, A through F accountability is back in the state of Indiana. And as a school communicator, we have to think, how are we going to explain this system of accountability to our parents, to our stakeholders? So we need to think about it from the front end. And then knowing that those letter grades are coming back, how are we going to explain those results? Whether you're an A, B, C, whatever school, families have assigned meaning to the letter grade C, the letter grade A, the letter grade F. We went through school. We have assigned meaning in our mind to those letter grades around quality. And how are we going to explain that to parents in a way that they don't just see that letter grade and then jump to an assumption about what that school is or is not? So we want to teach our stakeholders to be informed consumers of data and not to oversimplify or make assumptions about the data that might be presented to them as, in the case of A through F, a letter grade. Even if it's a great letter grade, but what does that mean? What does it mean if a building is an A school? How did they earn that rating?
That makes so much sense, because you're right. We have to realize that anyone we're communicating to comes with their own assumptions, their own prior knowledge, and we have to almost anticipate what that prior knowledge is, and ask questions so that we can anticipate more fully what that might be. Dana, my next question is, I know that in my daily workflows, I use so many different tools and have systems in place because, I've got a lot of projects going on all the time. I've got a lot of issues to resolve. I've got a lot of spinning plates. What are some tools or routines that have helped you scale your good communication without losing the human touch in the process?
You have to be organized and you have to prioritize. So when something crosses my desk, I have to triage it. Does it need to be done right now? Does it need to be done by the end of the week, or is this more of a long-term project? And in education, we have the advantage of being very cyclical. And I would dare say sometimes a little bit complacent, but we are very cyclical in what we do. So that provides a structure. That provides a structure for what our priorities are throughout the calendar year. But you have to know that at any point that can all go out the window and something might need all of your attention. And that's okay. I'm a fan of Claude, and I'm also a fan of OpenAI, because in a pinch, those tools can really give you a framework. And please notice I said a framework. It's not the answer. It's not the answer, because AI is not human and it does not have that human touch, and it does not have context, and it does not know your community. So I think that it is a tool, but it is not the solution, because we're in the people business. So if we can use AI to help us be more effective, more efficient, then I am all for it. But we're about kids, and kids need real adults.
100% could not agree more. And those are actually two words I use all the time when I talk about AI use. If it helps us be more effective and efficient while also maintaining our authenticity and our human nature, then we're using it in all the right ways. And I think you're right. Like, it's a great framework, or maybe a great starting point, because sometimes the scariest thing is that blank page in front of you.
Yes.
And if you can get something to start with and then make it yours, make it tell your district's story, to make it tell you your community's story, give it that context that it needs to actually land. But at least you're not starting from that blank page and that place of kind of fear of the first step.
Absolutely. And frankly, I think you can use AI to help support some of your weaknesses. We all have strengths, but there are other areas where we might just need a little bit more help. And that's okay. So, when we're really digging into those numbers and that data, I'll be the first one to admit I'd welcome a little bit of support in clearly communicating a mathematical concept. I'll be the first to admit it.
AI or other systems, anything we systemize, always is either going to amplify or silence different stories, right? If it's running through a system or if it's running through AI. And our job as the human in the loop is to make sure that our systems elevate the right voices and don't silence stories that need to be told. So what are some ways that you make sure that your systems elevate those just right voices?
I think access to information is something that needs to be brought into the conversation, because, we talked earlier about making assumptions about how data or letter grades or what have you will be interpreted. When I put out information, is it transparent? Is it accessible? Is it professional? And I'm going to say the word, is it equitable? So that's kind of my tape strategy. And when I say equitable, I mean, do our stakeholders have access to that information in a way that they can receive it appropriately? And AI, frankly, helps us with that. I think about messages that I send out through our messenger system. We use Parent Square and the translation feature. Just the fact that I can type a message and it will be delivered to a family in the language identified in our SIS, it matters. And I don't know, to some it might seem like a little thing, but it's not. It's not. That's about one of our stakeholders having access to information that they need.
Yeah, it's not small at all.
It's not small at all, whether it's, your website translating or having somebody in that front office that happens to be bilingual. Our communication has to be accessible to our families, and they need to be able to equally access it. So I think that's an area where, as school communicators and as leaders, we have to be very intentional. And we have to think about assumptions that we might make about what we're putting out there. And is it really being received by the entire stakeholder group, or have we often unintentionally excluded someone from that communication?
I love that tape framework that you shared, just to make sure that we're taking all those things into consideration. I think that's a great tool for any leader to view their communication, whether you're the communications leader or a building leader or a technology leader. Like, let's really dig in and take a look before we send something out, and use a framework, a system, to ensure that we're being as transparent as possible and that we're reaching as many people as possible. What a great tip.
We are in a beta test group for a chat bot on our website. And it has been fascinating as we talk about looking at data and looking at metrics beyond a heat map of your website. What people are really looking for when they visit your homepage versus what you in technology or I in communications think they're looking for when they go to our website. So that has been a really educational experience. Adding something as simple as a chatbot, and yes, it translates. yes, it is accessible. It meets all of my criteria, but seeing what families are really looking for. I mean, we've had families looking for news stories. We've had families asking about weather. We've had families that are really wanting more information from transportation, you name it. And then we've got kids that just type in 6-7, like it's all there. It's all there. But in my lane, that informs priorities. That informs priorities for my communication. If I have 5, 6 people that are all looking for a particular piece of information, then I need to prioritize that. I need to evaluate where it is on our website. I need to make sure it gets in that newsletter. I might need to put that on our social media channels because clearly families want to know. So I think AI has helped me be more reflective as a practitioner because it's doing some of that digging for me. I'm not having to go into the analytics on the back end and figure out, well, people are clicking on this more. They're telling me, and AI is compiling that for me.
So you've talked a lot about your focus on excellence. How do you align communications with broader goals around trust, belonging, and visibility while maintaining excellence at that core?
We put out a weekly newsletter. It's called News You Can Use. And while it always has the same framework, obviously the content changes week to week. And I've had people say, you do it every single week. And I'm thinking, how could you not do it every single week? There's so much happening. There's always content. And families can depend on that communication every Monday at 9 a.m. They will receive that in their inbox. And whether they open it on Wednesday or if they open it at 9:01, it will be there. And it will have celebrations of excellence. It will have district need to knows, and it will have all of our upcoming events and any accompanying URLs or links to that information. So families can expect that. So there's the consistency, and then there's always a celebration of excellence. But often I'll pull, when I say those need to knows, those are things that are, yes, they're on our website, but we're all on the move. We're all on our phones. We're not necessarily going to go through and find that link to that early application for dual language. So just knowing that it will be sent right to your inbox. We've gotten a lot of really good feedback about that. Prior, we had a quarterly newsletter, and geez, that was turning into a novel. It was turning into a novel, and honestly, I don't feel like it was timely. It was not timely information. I talked about, even if the data says maybe it should go out a little bit later, but it's happening right now. So we need to share it. We need to share that message in a timely manner. And then obviously we do the same. We do the same on our websites. And while they follow a consistent brand, a consistent template, a consistent theme, they are tailored to the unique personality and culture of each of our buildings because they're not the same. We're a big community. We're a broad and diverse community. And what one school needs might not be the same as what another school needs.
Dana, if every message tells a story, what story, we've talked about excellence, but what story do you hope people tell about your leadership and your district?
I think about my leadership, that I always want to honor those that came before me. And I want to prepare the next generation of leaders while I'm still in this role. So it's not about me. It's about what I've learned from those that came before me, and from what I've learned, what I can pass on to those that will come after me, because this ship's got to keep moving. And I think more broadly, from a district perspective and from in my perspective, now having been in this role and having seen it evolve as quickly as it has, is that I want to be thought of as a strong advocate for public education. I did my dissertation on school choice and how it has vastly changed in the state of Indiana and across the country over the course of the past decade. So I want to be thought of as a leader that is a staunch supporter of traditional public education. Yes, parents have choice, and that's not a bad thing. We're always up for a little bit of competition, because we've got the excellence. But public education isn't a choice for everybody. And so when you think about Dana and her leadership, again, I stand on the shoulders of those that came before me, and I'm building up the next generation of leaders, but all from the lens of supporting that fundamental, free and appropriate public education for our students, because it's what they deserve, and they deserve an excellent education. Every one of them.
And I think that really speaks to like your educator's heart, right? I think we're always like building up the next generation, because that's what we do every day. And that's why K-12 is so personal. As you talked about before, like we take the feedback very personally when it may not be personal, because we're so deeply invested in what we do.
We are, and we have the privilege of, we serve everybody. We serve everybody. And, people ask me, well, why doesn't your district have a 100% graduation rate? Now, you know the answer to this question, but your average person on the street doesn't know the answer to this question. And it's because we accept and we educate all students, and we prepare them for their what's next. And for some of those students who are not cognitively capable of earning a high school diploma, we prepare them to live independently. We prepare them to hold a job. We prepare them to be contributing members of society. And I think that's a win.
Absolutely.
I think that's a win. And I would stack that up to any, private school 100% graduation rate any day of the week.
All right. So to wrap up our conversation, Dana, I'd love to know, there are a lot of leaders listening who maybe want to start telling better stories, but they're not communications directors. They're not communications specialists. What advice do you have for any leader who wants to start telling better stories tomorrow? Where should they begin?
I would say, as building leaders, you know the strengths of your program, and you know your kids, and you know your staff. So if you are wanting to better tell those stories, I think you need to start by identifying what that story is. And if you need help, you don't have to go it alone. That's a great stand up at before or after a staff meeting. Hey, what excellence is happening in our building? Let's do shout outs. Let's do 30 seconds of shout outs. What's going on? And take those little nuggets of information, and maybe it's a social media post. I don't know what it is, because that's different for every leader knowing their community. But take those chunks of information and share them. As I said, a social media post, maybe it's in a Sunday message, maybe it's in a phone call, maybe it goes in a newsletter. But if you start to consistently ask, then people will consistently start to share, or they'll think of something that, oh, well, maybe the principal doesn't want to know about that. Well, no, he or she has indicated that they do. They do want to know about that. And again, everyone is so busy. Find those champions that can help you tell those stories. Find those champions and leverage their leadership. I am not Gen Alpha. I am an elder. I'm like the most elder millennial. I'm not on TikTok, but I know that we have staff with TikToks helping kids study for the SAT. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Maybe we put that out there. So it doesn't have to be serious, hard-hitting news. It's about engagement and excitement and meeting people where they are. And no, Dana is not on TikTok. I'm a communications professional, but I'm not on TikTok. But if I'm a teacher of high school kids, maybe that's something I should think about. And I can't answer that question. Those are individual questions for individual school communities. But where is your community? Where are they? Maybe they want a mailed newsletter. I have my own opinions about that. But, you know, I would love to just give someone a laundry list of all of those little chunks of excellence that were shared in those staff meetings, because there's always something.
It's great advice, though, because the communication isn't about you. It's about the person receiving the communication, and keeping that perspective in mind is key to telling those good stories. Because just because I think it's important, or just because you think it's important, doesn't mean that our communities think it's important. Doesn't mean they're even seeing it if we're not on the right platform.
Absolutely. I like to talk about the platform. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's part of that. That all goes back to tape.
Yeah.
Is it accessible to that audience?
Well, Dana, thank you so much for all of your wisdom and all of your advice. I think we'll probably all have a lot to think about, how our communication is landing, and whether we're thinking about the people receiving it or the people who are giving it. Because I think right at the beginning, you really hit the nail on the head when you shared that we listen even more than we speak when we're really talking about school communications.
Ultimately, we are here to serve our communities,
Mm-hmm.
and we need to prioritize what they prioritize.
Excellent advice. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Leading Out Loud podcast. I can't wait until everyone can hear all of the wisdom you have to share, and I look forward to connecting with you again soon.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Thanks for joining me on Leading Out Loud. If today's conversation sparked an idea, made you smile, or reminded you that your voice matters, I'd love it if you'd subscribe, share, or leave a quick review. And remember, your leadership deserves the mic, your story deserves the spotlight, and learning should always come with a little laughter. Catch you next time.